Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at something that honestly sounds like it was pulled straight out of a sci-fi novel. But it's actually happening right now in a lab in Switzerland. We're talking about finalSpark and their incredible pursuit of wetware computing. And by wetware, I literally mean building computers using living human neurons. Okay, let's dive into this.
To really grasp why researchers are even doing this, we have to look at the massive elephant in the room with modern tech. The current AI landscape, especially when we're talking about training large language models, it just burns colossal amounts of energy. We're literally staring down potential energy shortages just to feed these digital systems. But if we look at nature, biological tissue operates with a level of efficiency that silicon chips simply cannot match. So, what if the solution to our data center energy crisis is actually biological? Take a look at this number. Your brain, right now, as you're taking in this explainer, is running on about 20 watts of power. That biological engine has roughly 100 billion neurons, and each one boasts around 10,000 connections. finalSpark's co-founder, Dr. Fred Jordan, actually points out that if you wanted to simulate the human brain on a digital computer in real time, even a really imperfect simulation, you'd need a small nuclear power plant. So, 20 watts versus a nuclear plant, it's pretty much the exact definition of using the wrong tool for the job.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering the living computer reality, wiring brains to electrodes, forcing new neural connections, dopamine and digital rewards, the biological bottlenecks, and finally, a low-carbon AI future.
Section 1. The living computer reality.
So let's start with the physical substrate itself. What exactly is a biocomputer made of? The core processor here is something called a brain organoid, or a neurosphere. It's a tiny 3D structure of nervous tissue, only about 0.5 millimeter in diameter. finalSpark cultures these in their lab, starting from human-induced pluripotent stem cells. That means they take human skin cells, turn them into stem cells, and then carefully guide them to differentiate into brain tissue. And just to be perfectly clear here, finalSpark uses these strictly for non-medical computer engineering purposes.
Now, each one of these tiny 0.5 millimeter neurospheres contains approximately 10,000 living human neurons. And here's the truly incredible part. Thanks to millions of years of evolution, each of those 10,000 neurons naturally forms around 10,000 synapses right out of the box. So you're getting massive connectivity essentially for free. The catch, of course, is that initially this connectivity is completely random. It's a wildly powerful processor, but it has zero software. Section 2. Wiring brains to electrodes. Now, what's really interesting is the hardware reality of keeping these processors alive. finalSpark places these organoids onto multi-electrode arrays. Each organoid sits on 8 electrodes that can both send and receive electrical signals. Obviously, the tissue has to be kept inside sterile incubators at a constant 37 degrees Celsius. And to keep them alive, they use an automated microfluidic system that manages nutrients, gas, and pH levels. This incredibly delicate life support gives these organoids a lifespan of over 100 days.
And finalSpark has actually taken 16 of these organoids and connected them to the world's first remotely accessible neural platform. Researchers don't even have to be in the Swiss lab to use them. They have 24/7 cloud access. Right now, 9 selected universities from around the world are utilizing this platform. And honestly, the wildest part? They interact with this living tissue using standard Python code. A researcher can literally type a Python command on their laptop to send an electrical impulse straight into a living brain organoid.
Section 3. Forcing new neural connections. Let's compare traditional digital AI to biological AI for a second. In an artificial neural network, in ANN, if you want the network to learn, you just update the digital weights instantly through code. You know the exact mathematical transfer function. But in a biological neural network, a BNN, it's a completely different story. We don't have direct access to the connection weights, and the transfer functions are basically a black box. To program it, we have to rely on neuroplasticity. We literally have to slowly force the neurons to adapt and change their connections by using electrical impulses.
And here is the precise, gritty reality of how they use electrode stimulation to both encourage and discourage those neuronal connections. To force the network to physically change, researchers hit the tissue with what's called high-frequency tetanic stimulation. Specifically, they send a 20 Hz, 500 millisecond biphasic current of 2 microamperes right through the electrodes. This intense electrical training is what forces the neurons to actually rewire themselves.
And this brilliantly illustrates the result of that intense stimulation. Before the electrical shock, the organoid has this natural, spontaneous firing pattern, a baseline center of activity across the electrodes. But after hitting it with that 20 Hz stimulation, researchers observed a physical shift in where that center of activity is located. Some electrodes show decreased spontaneous activity, while others increase. So they are physically modifying the network's spatial firing patterns, literally writing new behavioral states directly into the biological network.
Section 4. Dopamine and digital rewards.
This brings us to finalSpark's closed-loop dopamine system, which mimics human behavioral learning right there in the petri dish. When researchers stimulate the tissue, they record the neural spike response over 250 milliseconds. If the tissue produces the correct, desired electrical response, the computer instantly flashes a UV light onto the organoid. Why? Because the fluid surrounding the tissue is loaded with caged dopamine molecules. That flash of UV light cracks open the molecular cage, releasing the dopamine and rewarding the biological network for a job well done. You're essentially training a microscopic biological machine using the exact same neurochemicals that make you feel good when you accomplish a task. It's mind-blowing.
Section 5. The biological bottlenecks.
Now, we have to ground all this excitement into reality. As finalSpark's co-founder Dr. Fred Jordan candidly states, living cells like neurons don't like too much electrodes. Biological tissue naturally resists this kind of technological integration. It is just a constant uphill battle to keep the interface between the living, squishy tissue and the hard metal electrodes functioning properly.
There are really three massive biological hurdles holding this field back. First, brain organoids contain glial cells. These naturally try to protect the tissue by encapsulating the metal electrodes, which increases electrical impedance and basically blocks our signals. Secondly, speed. Digital computers use electricity, which moves incredibly fast. Biological neurons don't do that. They communicate via ions traveling across cell membranes, which is agonizingly slow in comparison. And third, when a signal crosses a synapse, it involves the actual physical release of molecules, causing incredibly high latency compared to a traditional silicon chip.
Section 6. A low-carbon AI future.
Because of that biological latency we just talked about, biocomputers will never run standard desktop operating systems. Let's be real, you're not going to be booting up Windows 11 on a brain organoid anytime soon. Instead, finalSpark is targeting highly specific AI cloud tasks, like the ones handled by neural networks today, with a goal of having a fully working system in the next 7 years. Biological neural networks are, by their very nature, perfectly suited to simulate the artificial neural networks we already use.
And the ultimate payoff for solving these massive electrophysiology challenges, it all comes down to this number, 1 million. If Wetware computing can actually be scaled to perform these AI tasks, it could consume 1 million times less energy than our current digital processors. Think about that for a second. We aren't talking about a small percentage of energy savings here. We are talking about an approach that could practically eliminate the massive climate-altering carbon footprint of the entire artificial intelligence industry.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Right now, we are spending billions of dollars trying to teach rocks to think using massive amounts of power, while the most efficient learning machines in the universe are already biological. So what do you think? Will the future of artificial intelligence ultimately rely on a living biological spark? It's an absolutely fascinating paradigm shift, and one that finalSpark is pushing closer to reality every single day. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the future.